Hi everyone, it's Lindsay with High Altitude Astrology, and today I'm going to be looking at the chart of Quincy Jones. If you want to follow along, he was born on March 14th, 1933 in Chicago, Illinois, with a birth time of 8:40 p.m. Quincy Jones is now 85 years old, and he was born, as I said, in 1933. If you don't know who he is, he's a musician, composer, arranger, and producer who has had an interesting life because he was born so long ago and has had the opportunity to work with so many different artists throughout the years, including people like Ray Charles and Frank Sinatra, to Michael Jackson. In the 80s, he helped Michael Jackson produce the Thriller album, which really sort of shot him into fame. And then more modern artists like Beyonce, and he's also like a movie producer. He produced The Color Purple. He produced the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air television show. And then going back to the 80s, he was the person who put together the We Are the World song with all the different artists who helped raise money for, I believe that was for maybe feeding people in Africa. I don't quite remember that accurately, but basically he has a very large array of different things that he's done throughout his life with so many different kinds of people. So I wanted to look at his chart, and he's really quite a fascinating person. The reason why I wanted to look at his chart is because there is a Netflix show about him out right now, a documentary called Quincy. And if you have a chance to see it, it tells you all about his life and all about his accomplishments and how, he's still to this day at age 85, getting up every day and pursuing his dreams. So he is a 24 degrees Pisces in the 5th house of creativity. So right there, you get a very strong sense that he's all about the creative expression, because our sun in the sign of Pisces is that energy that can tune into the imagination and creative promptings, that, those very subtle influences that inspire the imagination. And his sun in Pisces is right there in that 5th house, which is also a very creative house. That's the Leo house of, fire energy, inspired to express itself in a way that likes to be seen and likes to be on the stage. So when you have a sun in Pisces in that fire Leo house, that's just a combination for somebody who really is driven to succeed creatively. And in a very wide conjunction to his sun, he has a Venus in Pisces. And Venus is another expression of the creative principle. It has to do with our ability to express beauty. And in Pisces, of course, again, it's being drawn to beauty expressed through music or beauty expressed through some sort of creative process. So a lot of times when you see people with not only with just their sun conjunct Venus, that means their solar nature, their individuality is connected with an expression of beauty. But then when you add that both that sun and Venus are in Pisces and they're in that 5th house of creative expression as well, you just get a very strong creative nature. Now, what's also interesting about his chart is that Venus at 14 degrees of Pisces is opposed, let me back up. That Venus is conjunct a little bit widely, but it's conjunct that North Node in Pisces in his chart in the 5th house as well too. And the North Node is where we are headed in this lifetime, the path that we need to follow, and that we're kind of constantly being drawn towards throughout our life. And one expression of that North Node in Pisces is certainly being drawn towards the creative expression. You know, another part could be being drawn towards developing some sort of spirituality in one's life, which he certainly seems to have done as he's gotten older, especially now in his life. So that Venus in Pisces is also opposite an 8-degree Neptune in Virgo, which is tightly conjunct the South Node at 7 degrees of Virgo and widely conjunct Jupiter at 17 degrees of Virgo. So in some sense, because that, and his Mars is there at 5 degrees of Virgo. So he's got a Mars, South Node, Neptune stellium opposing his Venus at 14 degrees. His Venus conjunct North Node at 14 degrees. So what to me this is suggestive of, and let's just break it down a little bit, Mars, self-assertion in Virgo, you know, that's like really being able to focus on the details of things as we assert ourselves. Conjunct that South Node in Virgo, you know, this could suggest that he comes from a lifetime where he mastered the Virgoan expression of repetition and focusing on details. You know, Virgo's really about being able to hone a craft because of the skill involved in paying attention to the details and really paying attention to, it's like apprenticeship, you know, learning something, learning a skill. So it's suggesting that he came into this lifetime having that energy already kind of honed in himself. But then you've got Neptune right there next to it. So, you know, it really suggests with this stellium, because Neptune is the planet again of creativity and musical expression, that he probably came from a lifetime where he had mastered music. Because one thing they say about him in the documentary is that he was a bit of a like a savant. Like he was tinkering on a piano and kind of like knew that was what his destiny was, and then took up the trumpet and amongst other instruments, but like really quickly became very good at being a trumpet player. And then of course the Neptune conjunct the Jupiter, it's a wide conjunction, but also a conjunction in Virgo. You know, Neptune being music and Jupiter being the ability to, you know, expand the perspective. You know, he probably also studied music a lot. I mean, he did. He went to Paris and studied composing, and, you know, in school he focused on music as well. So this is indicative of that really being a part of him in this lifetime, where he was able to kind of spend a lot of time and energy expanding that creative principle. Now, going back to that Venus in Pisces opposite that Neptune and Jupiter in his chart is, to me, suggestive of some of the excess that he's experienced in his life, because Venus has to do with our pleasures, and with the opposition to Jupiter and Neptune being drugs and alcohol, Jupiter just being expansion, this can lead to excess of the pleasures. And he talks about it in his documentary, that he definitely has abused drugs and alcohol in his life. And actually in 2015, he went into a diabetic coma because of excess sugars in his system from drinking. And it did sober him up, And what I find interesting looking at his chart at that time is that his transiting Neptune was conjunct his north node in Pisces at 7 degrees, which is also again conjunct his Venus. So, and then of course stimulating the opposition to that Jupiter, Neptune, and Mars stellium. So I see that transiting Neptune on that north node in Pisces, first of all, is very rare because it, takes Neptune 165 years to transit the whole chart. So it was never there in his life before, and it won't ever be there again. And Neptune can be some sort of transcendent experience where we are kind of lifted out of and transcend perhaps some of those, in this case, things related to the north node in Pisces, meaning, the direction he's going in this lifetime. And Pisces is all about spirituality and the ability to transcend. So this was just kind of giving him like a jolt or an extra dose of that need to kind of wake up and really shake him out of, and awaken him to the fact, obviously, that he was, abusing alcohol, and really kind of helped him straighten that part of him out. So he has a Scorpio moon at 3 degrees, and it's near his 27-degree Libra ascendant. And you kind of get the Libra ascendant vibe from him. He's very personable, he seems to kind of get along with a lot of people. But he's got that Scorpio moon there, which does make him intense. And this could actually also lead to some of that excess that he's had in his life, because the moon is about our needs and our, what we desire to feel secure. And Scorpio moon, can be that need to really go deeply into things. It can almost like obsess about things. So there could be a little bit of like a compulsion aspect to the behavior at times around, what we think we need and what we need to make us feel secure. And also, Scorpio moon is kind of an energy that likes to remain more hidden and not so much like out and exposed in the public, even though, that Libra rising can, play that game very well, and even that sun in the 5th house. But that Scorpio moon just is an energy that wants to kind of be more pulled in and hidden and not as exposed. So, the drugs and alcohol may have been one way also of just dealing with any uncomfortability that being in the public eye may have brought. What's also interesting about him, and you can learn this in the Netflix video documentary, is that he had a mother who was schizophrenic. And, the moon in Scorpio is sometimes related to, well, the moon is related to the mother, but in Scorpio, it can be the mother with psychological problems, because Scorpio is about like what's psychologically going on underneath the surface. And what amplifies this issue is that moon at 3 degrees of Scorpio is squared his Saturn at 12 degrees of Aquarius. And that Saturn is in the 4th house. So, so to have Saturn in the 4th house basically indicates that a parent may not be around, because Saturn is about contraction and limitation and literally, like, it can be like just not there. And I wanted to read from astrologyarena12.blogspot.com, who says that in some way, a child with a 4th house Saturn experiences a home life that is thrown into major disarray. through financial struggles, the loss of a parent, either by death or abandonment, etc., etc. So this actually happened to him. Like, he talks about how his mother, he remembers his mother, he was very young, 6 or 7 or something like that, was taken away to a mental hospital, and he was there when it happened. So it was a very big impact on his life, not only psychologically, but literally, because he was then kind of free to roam around the south side of Chicago where he was born, because his dad worked, and he and his brother, I believe, just kind of thought they were just going to be gang members. That's what he said his sort of goal was until the age of 11 or so. And that's another indication of a moon in Scorpio. It's just sort of being exposed to the underworld, the seedier part of life at a young age. So he also has some other interesting things. He's got the midheaven at 2 degrees of Leo. And to me, when you've got Leo at the midheaven, which is the area of the career, the 10th house cusp, that is indicative of, somebody who's going to potentially want to have a career where they are seen and they are in the limelight. And then you have to go to the ruler of the 10th house, which would be the sun in this instance, because it's ruled by Leo, because Leo was on that 10th house cusp. And then you go back to the fact that the sun is in that 5th house, in the Leo house, in the sign of Pisces, of creativity, etc., etc. So you can see there that he was really destined to take the center stage as far as his career goes. Also, Leo on the 10th house cusp, part of his way of, part of his 10th house energy being like what he's meant to do in this world, his work, with Leo up there is also about his parenting, because he actually had 6 kids from 3 different wives, I believe. That is indicative of Aries on his 7th house cusp, sort of just going into different relationships throughout the life. But part of his 10th house kind of work in this life was to, be a parent, because that's what Leo is about. It wants to create offspring, in its image. So I find that interesting that he had a lot of children. Now, what's also interesting is that he is having the transiting North Node just this month of October 2018 is moving over that 10th house cusp. So I see that as part of why right now the North Node in Leo transiting his 10th house cusp, why he's coming kind of back into the limelight right now, and being recognized for his work. I mean, it's just amazing to see what he's done in his life. But I see that North Node transit of his 10th house cusp as why he's back in the collective consciousness at this time. And another energy that's supporting that as well is that transiting Neptune in Pisces. Transiting Neptune in Pisces starting back in May of 2017 and completing in February of 2019 is moving back and forth across his Venus. And Venus is the ruler of his chart because he's a Libra rising, which just means that whenever anything happens to Venus in the chart, it has a lot to do, it comes out more strongly in the life. You can see it. And what's happening is that Neptune is moving over that Venus. And of course, Venus again is our creative expression, but Neptune is about glamour, and Neptune is about, a few different things, spirituality as well too. But it can be, this transit can be related to how we are perceived, how our Venusian feminine principle is perceived. And in this way, it's sort of being coated with this, this veil of glamour and, people wanting to kind of be attracted and drawn to that energy. And I'm reading from planetaryvisions.net, and they write about this Neptune conjunct natal Venus transit. And by the way, again, Neptune moves very slowly, so it's never been here in his life and never will again. They write that it's a time of becoming more glamorous and intoxicating to others. So I see that as fitting because, you know, he's certainly getting this kind of attention right now in his life. And the other transit that he's going through is transiting Pluto in Capricorn, opposing his natal Pluto at 21 degrees of Cancer. Now, this is not a transit that everybody lives through because Pluto moves very slowly and doesn't always, you know, come around to this halfway position from where it was in the chart when you were born. And in doing some research about this kind of Pluto transit, you know, Pluto is symbolic of deep transformation, and what I hear from him a lot in this documentary is that he's really more aware of how much, you know, he wants to appreciate life and how much he wants to really live life, the remainder of the life that he has left. But sometimes this can be indicative of actually passing on, the greatest form of transformation. And I'm reading from lovinglightastrologer.com, and they write that a transit of Pluto by opposition is generational. Pluto often symbolizes situations and circumstances that you have no control over, that can erupt the plans that you had. So it's just an interesting transit to note. I don't think there's a lot of information out there about it because, you know, it is something that not a lot of people actually live through. But I would say that he is certainly making the most of it. You know, Pluto can be a lot of energy if we focus it and harness it. And he is still, you know, creating up until this day. I mean, it's amazing how much he's still doing at this point in his life. So this has been my interpretation of Quincy Jones's chart. Check out his Netflix documentary if you care to. It's quite fascinating. And please subscribe if you like my channel. I really appreciate your support. And we'll see you at the next video. Thank you.